Welcome to the Wealthy Life Podcast. I'm Sybil Verch, and today's topic is an emotional one, but an important one. We're going to talk about all the things you need to do before you pass away. And no, I'm not talking about your bucket list. I'm talking about getting your financial affairs in order. And joining me to talk about this important topic is Pam Katunar, a wealth manager with Heart Wealth Management Group at Raymond James Ltd. Pam has over 2 decades of experience and is a certified professional consultant on aging. Pam, you know what you're talking about.
I've had a lot of experience in this area for sure, Sybil, so thank you.
Well, welcome. It's a pleasure having you here today.
It's great to be here.
So why is it important for people to have their affairs in order?
Well, it should be obvious, but I think given the fact that most people don't, it's important to have closure and peace of mind and harmony within your family, Sybil. There's just, when things aren't clearly laid out, bad things happen with relationships too. I've seen it many, many times.
So think about the burden.
Absolutely.
And just even myself, I'm young. I hope I've got many more years to live.
For sure.
But every time I go on a trip, I always think, what if something happened to me?
100%. And the checklist before you take off.
Yes. And I've got my will. But oh my gosh, I think about my house and did I leave a dirty laundry hamper full of clothes before I left? I mean, this is the crazy stuff I think about.
Well, in light of what we're talking about today, that would be way down the priority list. But I would say at first, the basics are making sure your will is done and reasonably up to date. You have to have your power of attorney in place and then some sort of legal document in today's world that defines who can speak on your behalf for health care issues. And that doesn't just mean end of life wishes. It's like in my dad's situation, he had Parkinson's for many, many years. And over time, his decision-making capabilities diminished. So even things like a different wheelchair or compression stockings or whatever, that all comes under that umbrella of care, that representative that can speak on their behalf for those kinds of things.
Right. So they're all three are different. So you've got the executor,
yes,
the power of attorney, and then the medical representative agreement, I think is what they call it.
Exactly.
Refer to it.
It differs a little bit in terms of the name, province by province, because all of this stuff is provincial, which again, lots of people don't understand. So when you're moving, if you're moving from province to province, we always recommend take your legal documents into a professional and have them looked at. They still may be okay, but at least get that check so you know that it's valid in the province that you're residing in.
And if you don't already have the documents, get the documents.
Exactly, 100%.
I think the stats are only about 50% of Canadians have a will.
Exactly.
What happens if you don't have a will?
It's a mess. So very, very expensive, very time-consuming, very stressful. And the assets that the person had when they passed away, most of the time get frozen. So it's also financially can be very stressful as well. Because CRA does not wait.
No.
Taxes are going to be due and bills need to be paid depending on, what the situation is when the person passes away.
So talk a little bit about the difference between appointing an executor in your will, a power of attorney, and a medical rep.
Yeah, exactly. So your executor doesn't have a job until you're dead. That's the easiest way I can put that. Yeah. So that's going to be the person who, follows the wishes that you've laid out in your will, but they also have responsibilities immediately because it's actually the executor's job to deal with the body, the funeral arrangements, the immediate things that need to be done right away, never mind all of the financial stuff. Oh. So the executor, you don't have a job until the person has passed away.
Okay.
Power of attorney is increasingly becoming important because that's the person that you rely on, person or persons, that you rely on to make financial decisions on your behalf if you're no longer able to do that. Right. So that's sort of that financial area. And then the other one is more defined in terms of, who's going to be more, not the caregiver, but who's going to make those decisions medically for you. And the first two, the executor and the power of attorney, you can't get professional help, but the healthcare decision maker for you usually needs to be a friend or family member.
Right. Somebody who really gets what your medical wishes are, is looking after your best interests.
Yes, exactly.
I think about the pressure on an executor when someone passes away and they're going through an emotional state. They've just suffered a great loss, and then having to make all those decisions on funeral and making sure even the house insurance is paid on the house. Like, these are not things that the average executor who's close to the person who's passed away really wants to think about.
Absolutely. It's really, really, and that's why the clearer the roadmap that someone can leave for the executor to follow, the less stress. So even the decision about burial versus cremation is a big one. And if it's not previously discussed, then it can cause all kinds of fractions in the family that's already stressed. So just those conversations, and I always tell folks, I'm happy to take the blame you can blame me for initiating these conversations, because these are not conversations that are fun to have, like what happens when I die. But I can guarantee that if you have those conversations when you're alive and not in a crisis moment, things are going to be so much better for you and your family.
So, and I like the idea of leaning on a professional to kickstart those conversations. I know even in my own household, when I bring up the discussion, my husband, he really struggles with it. He doesn't like talking about it.
Absolutely.
He understands it's important to do. We do have our affairs in order. I actually do need to review my will again, since my son is now 23.
Absolutely.
So probably some updates need to be done there.
Yeah.
But even talking about his parents and my parents, who hopefully they'll be around for many, many more years. But the older we get, the closer to the end we are.
Absolutely. And the reality is none of us know when our exit date. Well, there's a few people that might, but that's a different topic. But the reality is that there is no right time to start this. Basically, it should be now for all of us.
Yes.
But obviously, to your point, the older we get, the more important it is to have these in order. And to your point, revising and looking at these, we say dust them off every 3 to 5 years and make sure that the cast of characters is still the same. So, is your executor still, around to even do the job? And
do they want the job?
Absolutely. Absolutely.
Yeah. Okay. So make sure you've got your will, your power of attorney, your medical representation agreement set up. Those are the 3 basic things. You mentioned earlier, not all of us know when we're going to pass. Well, we don't. But there is certain circumstances where we do know our expiry date.
Absolutely.
Let's talk about that.
Yeah, no, for sure. I have always made sort of a comment when I'm doing estate planning seminars, et cetera, that if we knew, because as our jobs as financial advisors and investment advisors is to make sure our clients don't outlive their money. Mm-hmm. But in the situations now in our world where people are opting for medical assistance in dying, they actually do know a date in many cases, or a range of dates where they are going to have that procedure. And so if that happens to be the situation that you or your family are facing, loop your financial advisor in as soon as possible, because now we have that checkout date. So I always say, if we knew the checkout date, we'd do the math. Well, now we know the checkout date.
Right.
So now there's so many things we can do proactively, that because our focus shifts. Instead of making sure that lasts forever, what can we do with it now? And how can we make this tax efficient, less stress, minimize probate, all of those kinds of things we can work with the family to make sure that we can get a lot of things done.
Well, I always joke with my parents because I'm their advisor, and I say, if I could help you plan to spend your last dollar and your last day, I don't want a dime. Let's plan for you. But we don't know when that is.
Exactly.
My mom's side of the family, actually both sides of the family have longevity. So my great-grandparents lived to 97 and 98. My grandmother is still alive at 99 years of age. And so you look fast forward, I mean, what if they live to be 110?
Yeah.
So from a planning perspective, you don't want to outlive your money.
Exactly.
So most people leave a big cushion behind.
Right.
But a big cushion means when you pass away, there might be more in taxes to pay.
Absolutely.
So when you know the date, what are some of the things what do you see people do when they know when their end date is?
I've been through this journey a few times with clients, Sybil. So every situation is unique, and each one requires, individual consideration for the family and the individual, et cetera, because everyone's goals are different, et cetera. But all of a sudden, gifting becomes a great tool in terms of making, the client is still there. They can actually see the benefits of their children or grandchildren or whoever it is receiving the proceeds of their hard work.
It's beautiful.
And so, gifting with a warm hand, is a phrase that's been coined, but I think it's very appropriate. And I think it's also a wonderful, way to distribute some of the assets.
Well, if you give money away while you're alive, what does that save you?
There's no taxes on that in Canada at this point.
Yeah, unless it's coming out of your registered plans.
Absolutely, if it's a non-registered situation. So to your point, yes, very different paths for different kinds of accounts. And so make sure your beneficiaries are updated if you're choosing to leave your assets in until, passing. But you can even liquidate some of those because the tax is going to be, you're going to get paid tax on that anyway.
Yes.
So again, there's
pay now, pay later.
Exactly. So if you distributed everything, you'd have no estate.
Yeah, so there'd be no probate fees.
Exactly.
On that, which is great. And I really like the idea of people giving the gift. Well, they can see the gift being received and appreciated.
Exactly.
Yeah, let's talk a little bit about the different account types on things people should do. You talked about beneficiaries. So walk us through the different investment account types that people have. Where can you appoint a beneficiary? Where can't you?
Yes, exactly. So tax-free savings account, you can assign beneficiaries. And I'll say you can also assign contingent beneficiaries. So in today's world, when people are living so long, we're actually advocating for that as well. So not only if the first person had passed away, predeceased, then it would go automatically to the next layer, if you like.
Yes.
So that can be used on tax-free savings accounts. You can assign beneficiaries on RIF accounts. You can assign beneficiaries on RRSPs, or registered retirement savings accounts. The one that's tricky is the RESP, and that takes, I don't know if we want to get into that.
Yeah,
but
please.
It has an ownership structure that the beneficiary is usually the person, the student or the students that are eventually going to receive that. But it doesn't allow a change of ownership in a really easy way. So that one should have special consideration, not just relying on the beneficiaries.
Right.
So in order to not have the growth clawed back, et cetera. So that's,
talk to your advisor.
Exactly.
Make sure you have that set up.
Exactly.
And I think in cases where you may see that is if there's one subscriber to the RESP plan.
Exactly.
When the subscriber dies, make sure there's a successor in place.
Exactly.
Yeah.
And that's pretty common because we see grandparents setting up RESPs, right? Yes. And so if they pass away, then that's where you find yourself into that. Yeah. So update that subscriber for sure. And then your non-registered accounts you could look at a change of ownership or distribution prior to your passing away in terms of liquidating things. And obviously there's tax considerations on those kinds of things, and it also follows a very different path if the person that's passing away is in married or common law or whatever.
Yes.
Then it's going to, then we're focused on transfer things over to the spouse, and then we worry about the next generation. But if you're the last remaining partner, then things take a different path and there's different tax considerations. So
right. So there's a lot to think about there. But I think what I heard from you is make sure that you do have beneficiaries appointed where possible. Yeah. And then make sure you have a successor in the case of a RESP subscription type of an account.
And those are the more obvious ones in terms of what we focus on too, Sybil. But there's, as you go through these conversations with their parents, I've already been through that. Both of my parents have passed away now, unfortunately, and they were very organized. So I'm really thankful for that. Yeah. A lot of peace of mind with that. And my sister, who is a nurse, dealt with the medical issues, and then I helped with the finances, obviously. So we worked very well together, and it was a blessing to have somebody to work with in that situation as well. So that can work, but again, not all families cooperate either. So that's family dynamics play into how this is structured.
I like the idea that you talked about earlier, which is have that discussion.
Yes.
Don't assume. So many people are private about it, which I understand. Yeah. But when you keep it all in secret, write it in a will that nobody looks at until you're gone. Yeah. What if they disagree? What if they don't understand?
Absolutely. And that is so prevalent, is a misunderstanding. And sometimes it can be construed as, oh, they didn't love me as much. Well, that wasn't the reason why you didn't get the same allocation. Like there were a host of other reasons. But that is a hurt that carries on forever. So having those conversations while there is no crisis is one of the best gifts you can have in your family. And if you're, like you said, you have trouble bringing that up with loved ones, then blame your financial advisor or say, I went to a seminar, I watched a podcast, and we need to have this conversation when it's not a crisis.
So I'd like you to walk us a little bit deeper through the process you had in place with your parents. because it sounds like you had everything in order. So what are all the steps involved, and how broad did the conversation go?
Well, even simple things, and it sounds like it's simple, but even the discussion about burial versus cremation, that can be very divisive in a family, depending on, so talked about what preferences are, where the ashes should be, having conversations about, even, do you want a celebration of life or not? Or what does that look like? And where are even, like I was even searching for, I knew where mom's, her address book was. So I knew who people in her life were, so I could call to invite to their funeral, because you can put it online now, but there's some people you just want to call, that may not, especially in an older generation, that may not always just look everything up online.
I would never even think of that. And what a great idea. But just to have a list of all of the friends and family of the loved one.
Exactly.
So you know who to invite and who to notify.
Absolutely, for sure. And then there's things like safety deposit boxes can be nasty little critters if you don't have everything set up properly with signing authority.
Yeah, how do you get into it?
Exactly.
Yeah, if you don't have, if you haven't granted that authority.
Exactly. And you need to physically go to the bank. So Dad, went to the bank. He had his key. He gave it to us. He made sure we were on the safety deposit so we could get into that, because not as much now. I'm seeing a trend away from that, from safety deposit boxes, but there's lots of people who actually, the ones who do have a will, might store it in the safety deposit box. Well, if you can't get in there, you don't even know who the executor is.
No.
So it's a chicken and egg.
A lot of funeral wishes are written in the will, in the safety deposit box.
That you can't get into.
Yeah. So that's not a very good place. Where is a good place to store these things?
I mean, there you can get into catastrophic things like a fireproof safe under your bed or in your house. I mean, it's different for everyone, but in some cases, lawyer's office will keep a copy of that. That's more accessible than getting the safety deposit box. And some cases, people will keep it in their home, but the key is the executor needs to know where it is. Yeah. So, I mean, if you are getting to, back to what we were talking about with MAID, just give it to your executor. So they already have it.
Yes.
So there's no looking around. And then you go through the checklist. Another one that caught me off guard is when you, as executor, have to provide the vital statistics for a death certificate. You have to list your parents' parents, and where they were born.
Oh.
So that's another one it's not the process won't stop if you don't know it, but it just kind of is easier to have that conversation. Because I know where my grandparents, who they were, what their names were, whatever, but where were they born? That's a stretch.
Yes.
Or it was for me. So just questions like that.
Well, I was going to ask you, is there anything that you wish you had done that you didn't do when it came to your parents?
No, it went quite smoothly. It's just such an emotional time.
Yeah.
It's hard.
What do you think about, and I've struck a nerve there, and I think it's important for people to realize that when it comes to funeral arrangements, what's your thought on planning your own funeral?
I think that the more guidance you can give to your family, the better, the easier it makes it on us.
Yes.
So I think that that's a great idea. And even I've got some clients that even wrote out their obituaries. And I think that that's wonderful.
Wow. Yeah, because that takes a burden off. That's a lot of pressure to write.
Well, yeah, and it's interesting. And the beautiful thing about that is when you have these conversations with a loved one, you get to go through stories that you might not have otherwise covered. Because what was important, we all think of our parents as parents, but they were people before they were parents. And what was important to them, in terms of their life accomplishments, etc. So you don't always, it generates more conversation.
What about some of the non-financial things people should do that's equally as important in getting your affairs in order? And I'm thinking clutter.
Well, that's a good one. And that's important. So just make sure that your executor knows where all of your important documents are. Yeah. The rest of stuff can be, but I mean, in terms of if there are important things for you or your family, make sure that that's, again, put a yellow sticky on the back of the painting or somehow people know, because there's more disagreements quite often about the salt and pepper shaker or the painting or crazy little things that can still cause massive family disruptions, even more than the finances. So if there are important things that you want to gift to your kids or have the conversation, because sometimes what you want to give the kids, they don't want.
Like China?
100%. The dining room, cabinet. Get rid of those things. You've enjoyed them, you've loved them, get rid of them. So, trying to declutter is probably a good thing for all of us all the time, but for sure. Because somebody has to deal with all that stuff.
Yeah.
But there are services in today's world available to help with that too. So if you get yourself into that situation where you've got this massive property that people have lived in for the last 45 years and everything is full because you can.
Yes.
There are people that can help with that. So.
I think about my crawl space and I've got, bins of keepsakes that maybe were important 100%. To me and nobody else wants or needs that. So maybe I need to have a look through that again.
I've been guilty as charged on that one, Sybil, for sure. And my kids live a much more minimalistic life than what we did.
Yes, so, they're not as attached to things.
No,
which is kind of nice.
Yeah, exactly.
So how about in clients that you've worked with in the past, how has that experience been helping a client really get their affairs in order? What difference has that made?
I think it's huge in terms of peace of mind and also having the conversations with the children. I'm having active conversations with my clients right now about actively giving, because if I know my clients are going to be okay, then why would you not help the next generation or the grandkids or whatever? So
how are they reacting to that? Like, is it easy for them to give, or is it?
No, sometimes it is. Yeah. And sometimes there's still an attitude where some folks, no, after I'm gone, I'll distribute. But some of that is they just don't understand how it's going to work either, Sybil. So education at those stages is super important as well, to say, these are the reasons why it makes sense to do this now, as opposed to waiting till you're gone. So I think education is important with that. But I think the biggest thing with peace of mind, and when you asked me earlier what else should be done, I think create the space, if you could, to have those conversations, to accept forgiveness, to give forgiveness, to mend relationships, because those hurts carry on for decades. So there's that piece of that that's not financial, but I think it's so important.
It is important. Have those conversations you want to have. Don't carry that burden around. And I know a lot of people say when they're on their deathbed, think back to what are some of the regrets they maybe have, or conversations they wish they had had. It's never too late. Exactly. If you're thinking about it now and you're still alive, it's never too late.
Exactly.
So do it now.
Yeah. And the other thing that we're seeing with people living as long as they are, they don't, and that was very much the case with my dad too, with the Parkinson's. Parkinson's robbed somebody much earlier. So we lost him way before we lost him. So, don't assume that people are going to have full mental awareness and cognizance and can have deep conversations right up until the end. Because sometimes with dementia or Alzheimer's or whatever, these are ugly, ugly diseases, and they rob you of those kinds of conversations way before the actual death date.
Yeah, and that's why it's important to have a power of attorney set up now for if that situation happens, because it's too late. Yeah. Once you've been diagnosed with dementia, it's too late.
You can't do your legal documents at that point.
No.
And the other thing people don't always understand is a power of attorney cannot set up beneficiaries or change beneficiaries.
Yeah.
So those you need to do some long-term planning, and that's why I'm suggesting contingent, et cetera, in those areas as well when you're naming your beneficiaries. And make sure your life insurance policies are updated and that people know you even have them, because those don't show up on a statement in your investments.
No, and that your beneficiaries are still valid.
Absolutely, because those get changed.
Now, before we met today, you had shared with me a story about helping a client who was using MAID, so knew his end date. Yeah. And tell us about that experience. What did it do for him to get organized?
Yeah, that was, so one of his daughters was very much providing the care. So when they phoned me and told me that he'd had a long struggle with cancer and had come to the point where he'd done everything he possibly could, and now in order to not have such a painful continuation of life, he had qualified for MAID. So we had a tentative date. So we ended up having 2 or 3 meetings together, and talked to him. I met him, talked to him about what were his goals, what was keeping him awake at night, what was he stressed about, because that's the last thing he needs right at this point. So we were able to put things in place to basically gift his assets to his daughters prior to him passing away. Basically, when he passed away in this particular situation, he had no estate.
Wow.
So he knew everything was completely clean. He was worried about causing his daughters stress. They both had enough stress, as lots of sandwich generation people do.
Yes.
They didn't need more. And that was the last thing he wanted to do. And he wanted them to not have any conflict between them.
Yes.
So we took care of everything. So his daughter, so we had 2 or 3 meetings together to make sure that all of that was in place. And so his daughter had told me that once he knew his date and once he had all of his finances in order, the requirement for his pain medication literally dropped in half.
Wow.
Because of the peace of mind that he had. And so what ended up happening is he ended up deferring his May date for a couple of months and had a much more peaceful quality time. You know, they talked about so many things that they wouldn't have had that time. Like, talk about a precious period of time.
That is such a beautiful
So
story.
it was amazing. Tough meetings though, Sybil.
Oh, I know. And most people wouldn't want to have, but look at the impact it had not only on him, but on his family.
And I'm still working with his daughter and now his grandkids.
It's beautiful. Thank you. Now, you have a good book that you suggest people read.
Well, it's one that I came across in my, travels dealing with all of this. And it's called Someone I Love is Dying. And it's by Jeanne Sudden, Sedun. And I think that it is helpful. And I actually gave this again to one of my friends who knew her husband was terminal. And I was like, I don't want you to be surprised. I'm giving this in the most loving way.
Yes.
But the reality is, this is now a reality. And so it's no longer a hypothetical situation. It's real. And I know it was facing her right here. And so I gave this book to her to make sure she could have the conversations with her husband before he passed away as well. So I do think that if for someone who doesn't do what we do all the time, it was kind of a good roadmap in terms of what to cover.
Great.
So,
and it doesn't look like a very big book, which is good.
It's easy read. Yeah, for sure. Exactly.
Easy read. Not a light read maybe, but an easy read.
But also she was sitting beside him a lot, during that time. Yeah. So she had some time to, to be able to read that and go through it at his bedside.
Okay, we've covered a lot of ground today. We've talked about all the things that you need to do before you pass away. Make sure your documents are in order. Make sure you have family conversations. Make sure you do a little bit of planning, funeral arrangements, all of that. Where can people start? Like, do you have a recommended way of helping people get started and getting things in order? There's
a lot of resources out there, but I think where I would recommend starting, and this is what we give to our clients when we're talking these topics, is Estate Planning Reference Guide by Raymond James. And it's a great roadmap. So I say to people, even if you don't want to take the time to write everything in here, put the copies of the statements and your bank accounts and stuff in here, and then go through the important things and write it down, or have a document that speaks to those points. And then make sure your executor knows where this booklet is.
Not in your safety deposit box.
Exactly. Exactly. So I think that that's a great resource for people to get started. And if you're going to do this in today's digital world, make sure people know your passwords. Because if you do all this work and then it's on your computer and nobody can get into it, we've now defeated the purpose. So
yes. Yeah. And making sure that you have a digital copy or a written copy, doesn't matter. Your executor needs to know where it is.
Exactly.
Passwords. Yes. That's a whole other category, but I think that's in that booklet, isn't it?
It is. And that's becoming a bigger thing too. Just, who can get in and deal with your Facebook account or your points on your credit card, or if those things are important to you, that's part of what you have to deal with now today, in today's world too.
So Pam, where can people go to get a copy of this booklet?
Well, we also just contact us, obviously. And it's also available if you contact us through our website.
And what's your website?
It's heartwealth.ca.
Heartwealth.ca. And of course, we'll have a copy at thewealthylife.com as well. Pam, thanks for being with us today.
Thanks, Sybil.
As always, please seek independent professional advice before taking action. We are here to provide information to help you learn and ask the right questions to make smart decisions so you can live the wealthy life.